So today's subject is Sri Ramakrishna's experiments in religious life. Those of you who are familiar with Sri Ramakrishna's teachings and life, those of you who have read, most of you must have read, of course, the Gospel, the Great Master, and other related works which describe Sri Ramakrishna's religious practices, his experiments with different religious traditions, will be baffled and perhaps mystified at some of the spiritual practices that he undertook and reached perfection in these diverse spiritual traditions. Broadly speaking, Sri Ramakrishna's religious experiments can be classified into two broad categories. One, his experiments in India's ancient religious spiritual traditions. For example, his practice of Advaita sadhana under Totapuri, and then his practice of the diverse paths of the Vaishnavite tradition, looking upon God as a friend, as a beloved, and then as a child, and so on. Shanta, Sakhya, Madhura, Vatsalya, and so on. The five important parts. And again, his religious experiments, religious sadhanas, practices in the Shakta tradition under Bhairavi Brahmani. And also, as I said earlier, his religious training and religious practices of an Advaita tradition under the great teacher Totapuri. Jatadhari and others, some of the other monks who came to the Dakshineshwar also trained him in certain types of Vaishnavite sadhanas, like Shanta, means looking upon God as a child in that space. Now this is one part of it. And also his understanding and also his proper comprehension of the intricacies of some of the modern religious movements of 19th century India, like the Arya Samaj, Brahma Samaj, and so on. This is one category. Then there is another category, his practice of religious traditions which had their origin and development outside India. For example, his practice of Christianity, and also his practice of the Sufi mystic tradition, which he learned from a great Sufi saint known as Govind Rai, and so on. Now, one important point that we have to remember, and that is crucial to understanding the essence of Sri Ramakrishna's religious experiments. Even as a small boy, when he was perhaps 6 or 7 years old, he had a mystical, intuitive, spiritual experience, which actually doesn't belong to any of these categories. So you read in Sri Ramakrishna's life when he was a small boy, while walking through a narrow path in the paddy field, he underwent a mystical experience. He had a deep, intuitive, mystical experience, a transcendental experience, when he saw the flight of white cranes against the background of dark rain clouds. So this contrast. And immediately he fell unconscious. Maybe it's better to say that he entered the stage of the level of superconscious state. That is the better way of putting it. Losing consciousness means transcending consciousness from a mystical point of view. From an empirical point of view, when you lose consciousness, you collapse. But from a spiritual point of view, losing consciousness implies transcending the conscious level, reaching the superconscious level. This was perhaps the first deep spiritual experience that he ever had in his life. He forgot himself and he fell unconscious. Well, from a spiritual point of view, it is said in our scriptures that a great religious, a spiritual seeker who had established himself in all the basic qualifications for spiritual life will get an intuitive experience when he comes in contact with anything that is grand, sublime, beautiful. Anything which symbolizes the glory of the Almighty God will create in him a corresponding reaction. He immediately realizes the glory, the grandeur of the Almighty God, the immanent, omnipresent reality. This was what really happened. Well, there is an Advaitic reading of this. You know, in Vedantic tradition, Advaitic tradition, there are two broad schools which analyze the reaction of a spiritual seeker when he comes in contact with the spiritual truth. These two schools are called Shabda, Parokshvada and Prasankhyanavada. I shall explain, this is the technical terms. One school of Advaitic philosophers hold a view that a great spiritual teacher, if he is an extremely well-qualified seeker, will immediately have an experience, the transcendental experience, if he comes in contact with this ideal, even by reading or listening even once. It is called Shabda Parokshvada, which means if a spiritual seeker is fully established in the four important qualifications, namely that a complete discerning mind which enables him to identify the real from the unreal, which is Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka, means a proper discerning mind which enables a spiritual seeker to recognize what is real and accept it and reject what is unreal. The second qualification is complete dispassion, complete detachment towards any kind of pleasure or enjoyment or happiness, either in this world or in heaven. This is called Ihamutra Phalabhoga Viragaha, the second qualification. The third qualification involves a number of internal and external disciplines. Sense control, complete control of the mind, and so on, and deep faith in spiritual tradition, a complete, sincere, single-minded faith and conviction of the truth of spiritual reality. And the fourth one is very important, an intense yearning, eagerness for spiritual enlightenment, which is called mumukshutva. Now, any spiritual seeker who is fully established and who is fully equipped with these four important qualifications, which are collectively called sadhana chadushtaya sampatti, means four important qualifications. You should have a proper discerning mind. You should be able to recognize what is real and accept it, and reject what is unreal. Everything other than Atman, consciousness or God is unreal. God alone is the only reality. Second one, you should not have any desire for any kind of enjoyment either in this world or next. When you should not have any desire for going to heaven, that is a great stumbling block for ultimate spiritual unfoldment, the ultimate spiritual liberation in Vedanta. Even the slightest desire for heavenly pleasure is as great an obstacle as desire for worldly enjoyments. Because heaven, according to Vedantic tradition, is an extension of our concept of worldly enjoyments. The third one is, as I said, internal discipline, strong faith, conviction. It's called samadhi, sharka sambuddhi, etc. The fourth one, as I said, is an intense yearning, a strong, single-minded dedication and desire for liberation, for attaining the ultimate spiritual destination. Now, any spiritual seeker who is fully established in all these four important qualifications will immediately get a spark of that mystical experience. If such a spiritual seeker listens to an Upanishad mantra which depicts the ideal of liberation, or if he listens to a hymn, a devotional song, or even if he listens to a lecture on spiritual subjects, immediately it will produce an impact, a corresponding impact on the mind of such an advanced spiritual seeker. Vedantic texts compare the state of mind in a very graphic style. It compares to a person who is going in search of something which is very precious. Suppose you have lost something very precious. Well, some of you, suppose you have lost passport and visa, let us see, for example, a newcomer. You have to go in search of it. It is very important, or your identity card for that matter. Then, when you are walking along the road, if you find it lying on the road, or if it is something very precious, a diamond, or anything that you value very much, something on the recovery of which depends your whole life, let us say. And then when you are going in search of it, if you find it lying on the street, you will not mistake it. You immediately grab it. Why? Because your intense desire to regain what is lost drives away all other impressions and tendencies from your mind. Your mind is completely focused on that particular object when you are going in search of it. And when you find it lying right in front of you, you won't mistake it. You will immediately take it. You will have no doubt as to what that object is. This is one school. According to another school, which I am not going to describe in detail, but just I'll mention, according to another school, those who are not so fully established in these four important qualifications, if they listen to these Mahavakyas, the great statements of the Upanishads, like Tattwamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, etc., the great spiritual truths enshrined in the Upanishad statements, if they listen to these statements, they will understand it, they will intellectually understand it, think of it, they have to meditate upon it for a long time, maybe for several decades or maybe for several lives. Then only it will become an experience for them. Now, in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, we can see he was born with all these great spiritual qualifications. So naturally, anything sublime, grand, and beautiful reminded him of the Creator, the Supreme God, the reality behind this natural phenomena. In the Gospel, if you read, there is an interesting incident. Sri Ramakrishna himself recites. Once an Avadhuta, a Paramahamsa, a wandering monk, came to Dakshineshwar. Now, there have been such wandering monks. For them, every moment is a meditation. The entire world is an expression of God for them. So, in fact, spirituality is a 24 hours affair for them. Every moment they are experiencing their identity with the Supreme God. Such people were called sometimes Paramahamsas, sometimes Avadhutas, the great wandering ascetics. They used to roam about the Indian subcontinent during the Vedic times, during the early centuries. Now, in Sri Ramakrishna's time, such a great ascetic came to the Dakshineshwar. Now, sometimes he will look at the sky, the stars, the moon, the sun. Sometimes he will look at this Ganga flowing around. Sometimes he will look at the scenery, the garden, the trees and flowers and plants. Then he will dance with joy. Oh, how wonderful, how wonderful. Because everything in this world reminded him of the immanent, supreme reality behind all this. Now, they belong to a very high level of spiritual enlightenment. Now, most of you, I'm sure, who have read Sri Ramakrishna's experience of Christianity will be quite mystified. See, the experience I shall narrate here. Sri Ramakrishna had a great disciple who used to look after his needs after Madhur Babu's passing away, Shambhu Malik, who was staying. He had a house very close to, not far from Dakshineshwar temple. So, this gentleman was a follower of Brahma Samaj. Now, Brahma Samaj was a kind of reform movement in India, founded in 1828 by a great social reformer. His name was Raja Ram Mohan Roy. He passed away 3 years before Sri Ramakrishna's birth. He passed away in 1833. He had founded this movement. It's called Brahma Samaj. The Brahma Samaj was, in fact, a kind of, it is a combination, an elitic, it's sometimes called, rationalistic elitism, it's called. That's what it is often designated by scholars of comparative religion. Rationalistic elitism. They used to take all kinds of doctrines from all existing religions and make a mixture of it. See, a kind of artificial mixture, But they had a close leaning towards the Unitarian teachings of Christianity. They were highly influenced by the Unitarian teachings. In fact, their symbol also had something to do with the Unitarian church symbols. So this gentleman, Shambhu Malik, used to read a Bible to Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna perhaps must have heard of Christianity as a religion followed by the British people who were ruling Calcutta at that time. That much only. But he had an intuitive feeling that anyone who sincerely follows what he considers to be a path leading to God, the sincerity will take him to the Supreme God. This idea Sri Ramakrishna already knew. Now, Shambhucharan Malik used to read Bible to him. Of course, the only point that he perhaps didn't like about Bible was the insistence on sin. That he didn't like. He said, if you take refuge in God, if you take the name of God, then why should you consider yourself to be a sinner? If you consider yourself a children of God, then you are children of God, you are nothing to do with sin. That was the only part of biblical teachings which Sri Ramakrishna perhaps didn't approve of. Otherwise, he was a great admirer of Jesus Christ and admired him for his renunciation, his humanness, his love, compassion, and so on. So he had formed some ideas about Christianity and Jesus Christ. And then much closer to that place, there was another Mr. Malik staying, Jadunath Malik. He was staying close to the Dakshineshwar. He had a small house close to the temple, and Sri Ramakrishna sometimes while going for a walk used to go there, sit in the parlor and discuss different religious faith systems of 19th century, including Christianity. Jagannath Malik had a huge gilded photo painting of the Madonna and child hanging on the parlor. I know in those days, people with little money and little education used to buy the huge paintings with gilded frames and hang on their wall, along with Queen Victoria's painting also. So Sri Ramakrishna refers to that, to show their rich, their wealth and status, social status, etc. Now, Sri Ramakrishna one day was looking at this photo, Madonna, and suddenly he felt the picture had become alive and a light was floating towards him. It entered him, and his heart became filled with love and admiration for Jesus Christ. And for the next 3 days, he did not enter the temple where he was worshipping for quite a long time. Now, and on the third day, when he was walking in the court outside the temple, he had a vision in which a divine-looking person walked towards him, reached him, embraced him, and merged in him. And immediately when he saw that figure, he felt that it is the great Jesus himself, who had become a visible form which is coming towards him. Now, how do you explain this? Any spiritual personality who is sincere and honest and pure in his or in her heart, and who fully accepts the teachings of another great spiritual teacher, will have this supreme experience. Because the barriers of dogmatic religion do not stand as a stumbling block in front of him. Because experience breaks all the walls and barriers of man-made prison walls of dogmatic religion. It may be quite surprising for anyone how a person who did not undergo formal baptism, who never attended any mass or service or liturgy in any church, could get an intuitive experience of the divinity of Jesus. The idea is this: Sri Ramakrishna already had attained the highest Advaitic experience. If you reach the top of a hill and if you look down, then you could easily understand all the roads leading to that hill will ultimately end up on the top of the hill. But when we are following just one road, we may not be aware of the fact that there are so many other roads which other people are taking, going towards the same destination. But once you reach the ultimate spiritual goal, you can look back, look down, then you could see all the different faith systems, all the different forms of worship, ultimately could take you to the spiritual destination. Because for such an advanced spiritual personality, religion is essentially a matter of experience. It is not a matter of faith or doctrine or philosophy. Religion is essentially a matter of experience. In fact, his practice of other non-Advaitic systems, non-Advaitic paths belonging to Hindu tradition, and also his practice of non-Hindu religious traditions took him to the ultimate goal, because he had the intuitive experience which taught him that it is not doctrine or faith or conviction, but it is the ultimate intuitive experience which is the criterion of spiritual realization. I shall explain this in the language of one great Indian thinker, Aravinda Ghosh. Aravinda Ghosh says Sri Ramakrishna could drive straight to the essence of every religious creed. And in a recent unique example, in the life of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, we see a colossal spiritual capacity. First, driving straight to the divine realization, taking, as it were, the kingdom of heaven by violence. Just imagine this expression. Sri Ramakrishna took the kingdom of God by violence. I mean, he went straight to the essence of every religion. He didn't care to learn the doctrines, the dogmas, or principles. Even Advaita also. See, Sri Ramakrishna didn't practice a non-dualistic system of Vedanta philosophy for a very long time under Totapuri, his teacher. Within a very, very short time, he had the experience with his own teacher required several decades to achieve. That's what he means. So the kingdom of God is taken by violence means Sri Ramakrishna draws straight to the essence of every single religion. And he insists that the essence of every religion in its pure form is experience and not doctrine or faith or philosophical ideas. So he says, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa drove straight to the divine realization and took the kingdom of heaven by violence, and then seizing upon one yogic method after another and extracting the substance out of it with an incredible rapidity, always to return to the heart of the whole matter, the realization and possession of God by the power of love, by the extension of an inborn spirituality into various experiences, and by the spontaneous play of the intuitive knowledge. So he had this intuitive knowledge. He had already reached the zenith of spiritual realization, that is identity of the seeker with the sought, identity of the subjects, identity of the seeker with what is sought, identity of the knower with the known, which is called. Because at the highest level of intuitive mystical experience, the spiritual seeker realizes that what he is actually seeking is an immanent principle residing within himself. And the same reality is omnipresent, all-pervading. It is also transcendental reality. And once he realizes his own identity or her own identity with the supreme principle, that intensity, that purity, it enable him to go straight to the core, the essence of any religious system, without even reading any of the revealed scriptures belong to that religious tradition. That is the uniqueness of this. That's why, in fact, in today's world, no cultured person, no civilized person would dare to tell you that only one religion is true, all other religions are wrong. Nobody will tell you. From an intellectual point of view, one may take a phenomenological view of the whole thing and say, well, there is truth in all religions. Just as in a communical principle or just as an expression of broad-mindedness. But Sri Ramakrishna, according to Sri Ramakrishna, this is not a matter of phenomenology or intellectual analysis or comparative religion. It is a matter of intuitive experience. Because he experienced the truth that every religion, if properly followed by a sincere seeker, is an equally valid path leading to the supreme spiritual realization. That's why, Holy Mother says that Sri Ramakrishna didn't have anything to do with interreligious dialogue or ecumenical ideas. He says, it never struck me that Sri Ramakrishna practiced all the religions with the preconceived idea of preaching the harmony of religions. See, Swami Vivekananda built up a mighty philosophical doctrine of harmony of religions based on Sri Ramakrishna's teachings and experiences. But when Sri Ramakrishna himself practiced different religions, when himself underwent different religious experiments, he didn't have this idea in mind to establish a philosophy of harmony of religion. He didn't care about the principles of comparative religion or ecumenism or religious phenomenology. He wanted to know what that particular religion is all about. And he didn't care to learn its doctrines. He got some ideas from a real teacher and went straight to it. And within a very short time, he reached that mystical experience which perhaps required several decades for many formal believers to achieve. Now, what are the implications of Sri Ramakrishna's harmony of religion? One idea that he says is, as many minds, so many parts to the ultimate reality. That means there cannot be a single religion for all people. Each religion offers a distinct, a unique way of experiencing the ultimate reality. What is required? Sincerity, honesty, and purity of mind. And again, as I said earlier, Sri Ramakrishna emphasized the point that spiritual experience must be the basis of true religious understanding. Or rather, it is the basis of the highest religious understanding. And if a person could reach that experience level without following the formal or the formalistic doctrines and conventions and rituals, it is all the better. So, the essence of religion is spiritual experience. Very often, when religious ideas come down to the level of interpreters and commentators, very often a whole range of doctrines and dogmas are created. But Sri Ramakrishna didn't care for any of those things. He believed that essence of all religion, even if those religions don't admit it, is the intuitive spiritual experience. Now, he gave the example. According to Sri Ramakrishna, unless a person is able to realize the same goal through another religion, his spiritual experience is not complete. This is a new idea which Sri Ramakrishna puts forward. See, one may follow and reach his spiritual destination through his own accepted religious tradition. But if he or she says that that is the only path, it only shows the inadequacy of his level of experience. It doesn't imply the inadequacy of the religious tradition that he follows. It only reveals the inadequacy or the limitation of his own spiritual experience. Now, in this way, he has shown a proper right approach to all other religions. So, it is not that we should display our respect for other religious traditions. What is needed is to recognize the fact, from the highest point of view, religion is essentially a matter of experience. This idea was further expanded by Swamiji. Swami Vivekananda says that there are 4 levels of religious experience, religious experiment. At the grossest level, rituals. People belonging to different religions follow different rituals, different customs and conventions. It's like trying to follow one path which takes you to the ultimate goal, the top of the hill. When you are following that path, you think that's the only road which can take you to the top of the hill. But when you reach the hilltop, then when you look down, you understand there are so many roads, so many bylanes and highways, which are equally valid paths leading to the supreme goal. The idea originally comes from Rigveda Samhita. In Rigveda Samhita it is stated, Indram Mitram Varunam Agni Rahu Atho Divyasa Suparno Gurutman Ekam Sat Vipra Bhagudha Vadanti Agnim Yamam Matari Shwanamahu. In ancient Rigvedic Samhita, which may be 9,000 years old, because it belongs to 7th millennia BC. This Veda mantra, this Vedic hymn, speaks of different concepts of ultimate reality. Different names, Indra, Mitra, Agni, and so on. These are all Vedic, different deities belonging to the Vedic pantheon. And then this hymn tells us, reality is one. That's the meaning of Ekam Sat. Ekam means one, Sat means reality. Reality is one, but this reality could be called different names by different people depending upon the particular path which they take. So once they reach the goal, and from there, from the hilltop of the supreme experience, when they look down, they will realize that there are so many other roads which are equally valid paths which could take you to the supreme goal. I'm trying to relate Sri Ramakrishna's doctrines with some of the old ancient Vedic and Vedantic ideas. What Sri Ramakrishna did was, he experimented all this and he realized all this, and then he gave a very simple, easily intelligible interpretation in the language of the modern person. See, for example, in one of his stories he says, there's a parable in Sri Ramakrishna of a chameleon which changes its color. See, somebody was sitting on the branch, on the top branch of a tree, and there was a chameleon below, and one person came, he found it was green in color. He went away, chameleon is green in color, the creature. After some time, another visitor came, a traveler. He thought it was black in color because he found it black. It goes on changing its color. Another parable which Sri Ramakrishna said was, the 4 blind men who tried to touch an elephant. So the one who touched the foot of the elephant thought it is like a pillar. Another which touched the body of the elephant thought it is like a huge mountain or something very solid. Like that, these blind men touched different parts of the elephant, and they came to their own conclusions. But their conclusions were all wrong. Only the person who could see the elephant in its totality could understand what the elephants looked like. So in a way, all the blind men were right, but it was partially right. It was not the whole of truth. So if somebody tells you that one particular religion it alone is the right path, he is right and wrong. He is right when he says it is the right path. He is wrong when he says that is the only right path. That is the point. That is the essence of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. Now, another implication of Sri Ramakrishna's experiments with religion is a kind of mutual enrichment. See, if you read Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, your own faith in your own religious tradition will get enriched, strengthened. That's one important point. Sri Ramakrishna says, if you sincerely follow your own religious tradition, then it will take you to the ultimate goal. And sometimes this is explained in the light of a story from a well-known book. The story of a poor rabbi. One day he had a dream. An ancient Jewish sage appeared to him in a dream. And the Jewish sage told him, there is a pot of wealth hidden under a bridge little away from here. You go there and you get it. So this poor rabbi went there, and there he found some soldiers guarding the bridge, and one soldier. So he asked one soldier, I had a dream. In the dream, one sage told me there is a pot of gold hidden under this bridge. Then the soldier said, with a derisive smile, he said, oh, I had a similar dream. I had a dream in which the same sage told me there is a pot of gold hidden in the kitchen, under the kitchen floor of a poor rabbi. So then the rabbi went back and he started digging under the floor of his own kitchen. There he got a pot of gold. That's what he says. So even those who lost faith in their own religious tradition will find that their own faith, their own conviction of the genuineness of their own religious tradition will be enriched and strengthened. From a philosophical point of view, in one of the important scriptures, one of the Upanishads, there is a story which throws a flashlight into the metaphysical implication of Sri Ramakrishna's realization. There is a story. The story means it's in the form of a dialogue between a father and his son. The son was sent for higher education to another hermitage. When he returned, the father's name is Uddalaka and the son's name is Shvetaketu. It comes in the 6th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad. So when the son returned, the father found the son had become so proud and so proud of his learning. There was no humility, which is a hallmark of an educated wise man. Then the father asked him, did you learn that by knowing which everything unknown becomes known? This question was put by the father to the son. He said, no, I didn't learn that. So, he says, no, Asudam sudam bhavati, amadam madam bhavati, avijñādam vijñādam bhavati. Did you listen to that spiritual wisdom by listening to which everything that is unknown becomes known? Son said no. Then the father tells him, there is one supreme truth, and the truth is this. The reality is one, that is supreme consciousness, and it is the immanent principle residing in everything in this world. It is the transcendental principle. It is also the all-pervading, omnipresent reality. But while teaching this, he uses certain similes and examples and figures of speech. So he says, Ekena mrpandena sarvam mrmayam vijñādam syāt vācārambhanam vikāro nāmadheyam. Ekena lokamanina sarvam lokamayam vijñādam syāt vācārambhanam vikāro nāmadheyam lokamityeva satyam. And ekena nakha nigrindanena sarvam kāshnāyasam vijñādam syāt vācārambhanam vikāro nāmadheyam Krishnāyasam ityeva satyam. I shall explain in English. I just quoted this for your reference, for those who are interested. It comes in the Chandogya Upanishad, 6th chapter. This is the description. The father told his son, if you can really understand the nature, the attributes, the characteristics of a grain of clay, then you could easily understand the characteristics and attributes of anything made of clay. If you could really analyze and understand the true nature of a grain of clay, then you will be able to explain the characteristics of a huge pot made of the same type of clay, or a glass, or a pots and pans and so on. Because these pots and pans and all these are different permutations and combinations, different manifestations, different names and forms, that's all. One form it is called a pot, another form it is called a glass and so on. But the clay is the same. Similarly, the essence of all religious practices is the same. The experience that the reality is one, the God is one. It is a supreme reality, it is supreme consciousness, absolute, knowledge absolute, and bliss absolute. After this, the Father continues his instruction, elaborating on the same point. He says, if you know the nature of gold, then you could easily understand the nature and characteristics of all types of instruments, all types of ornaments made of gold. So different ornaments are nothing but different forms and different shapes and different names and different colors, that's all. Again, if you could understand the nature of a small nail cutter made of iron, then you could understand anything made of the same type of iron. Similarly, if one could realize the ultimate destination of a single religious tradition, the real proof of that mystical intuitive experience is that person will never deny the genuineness, the credibility of other religious traditions. Everything else is secondary. So Swamiji, as I said earlier, Swamiji said the beginning of religious life is maybe rituals. But he insisted rituals constitute only the kindergarten, the beginning of spiritual life. At the level of rituals, there can be no harmony of religions. Each religion follows its own rituals, conventions and traditions based on the cultural, sociological, anthropological factors under which that particular religious faith system happen to evolve. Because every spiritual teacher contains in him two aspects of personality, the divine, the universal, and the human. The human factor is related to the cultural, sociological, anthropological elements. Very often we stress and we put emphasis on these factors. These are secondary factors. Their essence is the spiritual aspect that is related to the intuitive experience. So Swamiji says rituals are necessary, conventions are necessary, doctrines and dogmas may be necessary, but they constitute only the beginning of religious life, not the ultimate goal. The second level of spiritual evolution in religious experiment, according to Vivekananda, who got all these ideas from Sri Ramakrishna's life and teachings, is mythology. Mythology is only an attempt to justify, philosophize conventions and customs. There may be some similarities, but there cannot be harmony between different religious traditions. The third level is philosophy. At the philosophical level, there could be some common factors, some commonalities between different religious traditions and faith systems. But there could also be several dichotomies and contradictions and also dissimilarities. But then at the last stage, at the level of experience, there can be no differences. This idea finds expression in one of the most graphic, picturesque descriptions in the Mundaka Upanishad. See, yatha nadyas chandamana samudriya astam gacchandi namarupi vihaya Tatha vidwan namarupad vimuktaha paratparam purusham upayadi divyam. It's a very famous statement. It comes in the Rigveda Samhita also. Look at the picturesque simile and the graphic description. So many rivers. All these rivers are rivers only till they merge with the ocean. When that part of the river, I mean the water, becomes one with the ocean, then it's no more called a river. It's ocean only. Similarly, when all rituals, dissimilarities, contradictions at the lower levels of rituals and mythologies cease to exist, when the flow of religious life reaches the ultimate destination, that is experience, the ultimate mystical intuitive experience, then when we look back, we understand these paths which the rivers took on their journey to the ocean were called different names because of their different shapes and forms. But once they once they merge with the ocean of intuitive experience, then there is no more diversity, there is no dissimilarity. It is one, and that experience can only be experienced. That's what Sri Ramakrishna insists. Experience cannot be explained. It's a very interesting. See, this is explained in the Rigveda Samhita, Antaya Bahuvadinam Anantaya Mokham. In the grand statement of Rigveda Samhita. The language of the infinite is silence, and the language of the finite is verbosity. That's what Veda says. But Sri Ramakrishna puts in a very, very simple, but at the same time, graphic style. He says, you cannot even explain how sweet the milk tastes. If you drink a glass of sweet milk, you cannot explain how you felt, how you tasted. The sweetness of sugar cannot be explained. Then how could you explain the experience of the ultimate mystical reality? So that's why he says, this experience is the only thing which remains unexplained. That's what he says. Because experience can only be experienced, can never be explained. And once we reach this level, we understand the reality is one. It reaches its destination only at the level of experience. So when he practiced these 5 types of Vaishnava sadhanas which I outlined earlier, and the Shakta sadhanas under Bhairavi Brahmini, the Advaita sadhana under Totapuri, and other innumerable ways and paths of spiritual practices, he could get immediate result because he had already reached the top of the hill. Now again, if somebody comes down, he can get to the top of the hill very easily, because once you reach the highest level of experience, then you realize all the different religious traditions and faith systems are equally valid path leading to the same goal, which in his own language he says yatoma tathapad, means so many parts. So there are as many parts as there are views, opinions and religious faith systems. They are all equally valid. The problem is only with the seeker. If the seeker is earnest, sincere and honest and pure, he could very easily reach the supreme goal. It's a unique contribution of Sri Ramakrishna. In fact, he has revolutionized the very concept of harmony of religion. Harmony of religion is not any kind of elitism, taking things from different religions. Rather, it is the real harmony of religion is built upon the principle that the essence of every religion is the intuitive experience. Once you reach the experience, then you won't find any disharmony. It is not that you borrow doctrines and dogmas from different religions and make a mixture of it. That was tried by Akbar the Great in the 16th century, called Din-i-Ilahi. He concocted a kind of religious mixture. It was a total failure. Nobody followed it. Even he himself later gave it up. That's what historians say. Then Raja Ramamohan Rai also tried to concord a kind of mixture. Brahma Samaj was actually a mixture of Unitarian Church, Upanishadic ideas, Vedic ideas, and all kinds of religious doctrines. It's an elitism. It also failed. So borrowing and putting together is not the way to achieve religious harmony. The real path is to go straight to the core of, to the essence of every religious tradition. That is experience. And Sri Ramakrishna established the doctrine of universal spiritual harmony based on this essence, this core of all religions, that is intuitive experience. So I think I have already taken enough time. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.